beautiful face, with a shocking secret. This 1891 thriller by the renowned Irish author Oscar Wilde offers deep thoughts on the nature of beauty, love, and man. Wilde uses the character of Dorian's mentor, Lord Henry Wotton, to shift Dorian's morally ambiguous life from one of sweet innocence to something much darker. Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde was born to Sir William Wilde and Jane Wilde on October 16, 1854 in Dublin, Ireland. His father, Sir William Wilde, was a leading ear and eye surgeon as well as a writer of Irish folklore. His mother, Jane Wilde, wrote prolifically about Irish nationalism. When he was a child, his mother would often host Saturday salons with important writers. These salons influenced most of Oscar Wilde's works and his views of English society. They were his only literary influence until the age of 9, when he was sent off to attend Portora Royal School. Afterwards, he attended Trinity College and Magdalen College, Oxford. During the next few years, he lectured in France and the United States, with his success being attributed to his involvement in a new cult of arts movement called the Aesthetics Movement that focused on creating art for art's sake. Afterwards, he became an editor at Woman's World, where during the next few years, he was filled with an intensely creative spirit and produced his best works. He wrote large volumes of poetry and even several plays, but is most well known for his greatest novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, where he received much praise over the prose, but much criticism over the morality.
When we first meet the beautiful Dorian, he is stuck between the influence of the wholesome painter Basil Hallward and the cynical intellectual Lord Henry, who often flatters Dorian, reminding him that
beauty is a form of genius, is higher, indeed, than genius, as it needs no explanation. It is one of the great facts of the world, like sunlight, or springtime, or the reflection in dark waters of that silver shell we call the moon. It cannot be questioned.
Henry reminds Dorian of this after the unveiling of Dorian's portrait by Basil. Staring at his own portrait, Dorian becomes entranced with his good looks, and in a fit of narcissism wishes that he could, instead of growing old and losing his beauty, remain as flawless as his portrait for the rest of his life. Here we see a glimpse of a changing Dorian, more selfish than before, a change insinuated by Lord Henry's radical views of beauty. As Dorian ages, he not only grows more under the influence of Lord Henry, but also in ways typical of a young man. He finds love in a form as beautiful as himself. Sybil Vane is an obscure actress at a third-rate theater, but to Dorian Gray, she is an embodiment of perfection. For many weeks, Dorian continues to pursue his love at the theater, swooning over Sybil as she transforms into a new lover each night.
Ordinary women never appeal to one's imagination. No glamour ever transfigures them.
One night, after discussing the merits of being in love with an actress with Lord Henry, Dorian proposes to Sybil. All at once, her world bursts with the color and passion of the plays in which she acts. And as she returns to the stage the following night, her acting is as dull as her life was before, leaving Dorian horrified.
You have killed my love. You used to stir my imagination. Now you don't even stir my curiosity. You simply produce no effect. I loved you because you were marvelous, because you had genius and intellect, because you realized the dreams of great poets and gave shape and substance to the shadows of art. You have thrown it all away. You are shallow and stupid.
Dorian sulks off into the night, and shocked, saddened, and alone, Sybil takes her life.
With the next day dawning, Dorian starts to reflect on his actions, realizing how cruel he had been towards Sybil. Not knowing that she had already taken her life, Dorian makes up his mind to atone for his bad behavior and marry her anyways. However, his plans are crushed when Lord Henry pays a visit and notes upon Sybil's suicide. Henry seems quite undisturbed by the whole matter.
But really, Dorian, how different Sybil Vane must have been from all the women one meets. There is something to me quite beautiful about her death.
To Henry, this death of tragic love was the best thing Sybil could have ever given Dorian. But Dorian does not see it this way. His cruel words had taken the life of a young woman he bore no scars to show his crime. Coming home that evening, Dorian glanced at his portrait and noticed something.
The strange expression he had noticed in the face of the portrait seemed to linger there, to be more intensified even. The quivering, ardent sunlight showed him the lines of cruelty around the mouth, as clearly as if he had been looking into a mirror after he had done some dreadful thing.
Eventually, Dorian realizes that the painting has started taking his soul's impact rather than his body.
Did it merely take cognizance of what passed within the soul?
He thought the aging and corruption of the portrait was so terrible that it must be covered up and locked away, only to be looked at on rare occasions. As years passed, Dorian took advantage of not aging and took that as liberty to live large. Dorian's narcissistic attitude causes much chatter behind his back, but nobody could bring themselves to criticize him to his beautiful face.
With the help of Lord Henry, Dorian begins to think of himself as invincible. He acts against the laws of society and feels no shame. He sleeps with men's wives. He even ruins his friends' lives to the point where they refuse to say his name. One evening, Dorian comes home, and there meets the man who painted his mysterious portrait, his old friend Basil Hallward, waiting to talk to him. Basil explains that he was going away on a trip, but wanted to stop by and talk first. He addresses the terrible gossip that has been accumulating around Dorian, and pleads with Dorian to live in the light, to give up his shady dealings and treacherous ways, a plea to which Dorian gives no heed. This confrontation brings Dorian and Basil into the attic, where the painting is kept, and Dorian reveals it to Basil. While Basil is in shock at how unsightly Dorian's painted face had become, the mirror of Dorian's soul, Dorian stabs and kills him. This does not move Dorian in any way.
How quickly it had all been done. He felt strangely calm.
Yet that same moment, the portrait's hands begin to drip with blood.
With Basil's death now past, Dorian settles into a chair and begins to read.
To see her bosom covered o'er with pearls, her body suave, the Adriatic Venus soar on sound's chromatic wave. The domes that on the water dwell pursue the melody in clear drawn cadences and swell like breasts of love that sigh. My chains around a pillar cast, I land before a fair, and rosy, pale facade at last upon a marble stair.
Even in the darkest parts of his life, Dorian uses beauty as an escape, drawn into the seeming motif of his life, that pleasure, beauty, and the carnal desires of life are the only things worth living for.
As the years pass, Dorian comes to realize the sinner he's become. He becomes agitated and self-aware of all the crimes and horrors he has committed, eventually grasping how much of a burden he has put on himself. Despite having everlasting beauty and youth, he damaged his own soul and begins to loathe himself.
He loathed his own beauty, and, flinging the mirror on the floor, crushed it into silver splinters beneath his heel. It was his beauty that had ruined him, his beauty and the youth that he had prayed for. But those two things, his life might have been free from stain.
With this understanding of himself, Dorian feels that he must be rid of the picture. He believes that destroying the portrait will eliminate his terrors in his past and finally bring him to peace. After some thought, Dorian walks up to the attic and, using the same knife that he used to kill Basil, stabs the picture. Upon stabbing the portrait, Dorian himself falls down in terrible agony. When the police finally enter the attic due to a horrible noise, they find a portrait of a fresh-faced and beautiful young man, and on the floor, a body with a face bearing enough sin to fill several lifetimes.